Hello, listener. The fact you hear this means you're alive. If you're new here, consider subscribing and comment below where you're listening from. Let's begin the story. My name is Rowe, and this is how I ended up making a home under a winery while the world above tore itself apart. I'm no soldier, no engineer, not the kind of guy who ever signed up for anything like this. Before the outbreak, I worked loading docks, managed inventories, and drove a forklift on night shifts. I came out here because I heard there might be storage, water tanks, and maybe some untouched food. I stayed because the cellar offered something I hadn't seen much of on the road. Thick stone walls, limited sight lines, and heavy doors that could be secured from the inside. The winery itself was unremarkable. A small, family-owned spot just outside a town that had made the news for all the wrong reasons. There was a 2-story tasting room with dusty tables, a gravel lot with faded parking lines, a few rows of grapevines clinging to the hillside, and a square concrete cellar built into the slope, looking like a forgotten bunker. The faded sign by the road still advertised tours daily, but half the letters were gone, the rest swaying precariously in the wind. When I first descended those steps, the air was cool and still, carrying the scent of oak, yeast, and old wine spills. A single fluorescent strip light hummed above the entrance, and deeper inside, a faint metallic click echoed once, then went silent. I couldn't tell if it was tools settling, a door shifting, or someone holding their breath, unwilling to acknowledge my presence. I'd been living in my truck for 3 nights straight. Fuel was low. Food was even lower. Every town I'd passed seemed to have another broken window, and one less safe haven I could keep driving, hoping for a miracle to appear over the next horizon, or I could commit to one place, hunker down, and try to make it work alone. I didn't get here on purpose. The winery was a mark on an old delivery map from my last job, one of those places you drive past and never give a second thought. Back then it was just another stop. After the outbreak, it turned into a point on a list in my head. Cold storage, pumps, racks, any place that might still hold water and food. The day I headed out here, the sky was dull, and the highway lay empty. I was driving a pickup with only one working headlight and a quarter tank of gas. The main road into town was blocked by 2 crashed cars and a bus on its side. Someone had tried to clear them once, then given up. I didn't stop. I took the service road that wound around the hill instead. My truck bounced over potholes and loose gravel. No lights in my rear view, no dust trail following, no walkers in the ditch. The first time I saw the winery sign that day, it felt like a test. Faded paint, chipped arrow. The words "Tours Daily" were half peeled. I knew there was a cellar here, some storage, maybe a well. I also knew anything useful was probably either already taken or already claimed. My choice was simple. Drive past and run out of fuel somewhere I couldn't control, or turn in and see if this place still had any life left in it. I slowed at the turn and cut the lights. No telltale glow on the hill, no fire, no glint from broken glass. I rolled past the entrance once and looked through the open gate. The gravel lot was half overgrown with weeds. A tasting room sat derelict on the left. The main building was a square, plain structure on the right, featuring a wide door for deliveries and a ramp that sloped down toward the cellar entrance. I kept going, then pulled over into a dip in the road where the truck would be harder to spot. I listened with the engine off. The wind rustled through the vines, a loose piece of metal tapped somewhere nearby, and nothing else. No shouts, no engines, no distant sirens. Barging in loud would have been stupid. I left the truck, took my pack, and crept back along the ditch line until I could see the gate at an angle. The chains on the gate were still looped through, but the padlock was gone. Someone had been here after everything fell apart. That could mean someone was still inside, or they'd taken what they wanted and moved on. I stayed off the concrete and hugged the grass strip along the fence line, one cautious step at a time, heel first, then toe, testing for glass or loose stone beneath my worn boots. At the corner of the lot, I stopped and watched the tasting room windows. No movement, no telltale shadow across the grimy glass. The front door of the tasting room stood propped open with a crate. That immediately bothered me. Nobody trying to stay safe leaves a door gaping open like that. I backed away, circling wide, keeping the building between me and the road. Behind the main structure, I found the production area, gleaming stainless steel tanks, a covered loading pad, and a roll-up door half ajar. The ramp to the cellar started there, a strip of cracked concrete leading to a metal door set into the hill. A hand-painted sign above it still declared cellar tours, with a faded arrow pointing down. One hinge was heavy with rust, and fresh scratches marred the paint around the handle. Something had clearly tried to force that door more than once. I knelt at the top of the ramp, pressing my hand flat against the concrete, and waited. No vibrations, no steady thump of fists, no desperate scrape of nails. The only sound was the ragged rhythm of my own breathing. I had choices to make. I could clear the tasting room first, then sweep the office. I could try the tanks in the yard, see if there were any usable hoses or a well hookup. Or I could focus on the one thing that mattered if I wanted to stop running: the cellar door. I stared at that door until my knees began to ache from kneeling. Ultimately, the decision was starkly simple. Open ground and thin walls were a death sentence. Heavy doors bought time. This cellar was the best chance I was likely to see for days, maybe weeks. I stood up, tightened the straps of my pack, and walked down the ramp, ready to see if it would let me in. The cellar door was painted dark red, its surface bearing scars around the handle. I pressed my ear against the cold metal and held my breath. Nothing. No scrape, no thud, no sluggish drag, no hint of a presence on the other side. I tried the handle. It moved a little, then met firm resistance. The lock, to my relief, was still engaged. That was a small victory. I took a step back and examined the frame. No fresh splinters, no broken hinges, no streaks of blood. Whoever had attacked the door around the handle had used tools, or perhaps a rock. These weren't the marks of bare hands. I reached into my pack for the small pry bar I carried and carefully wedged it near the latch. 2 slow, deliberate pushes and the latch plate flexed, allowing the tongue to slip free. The lock gave with a dull, resonant click. I froze, listening intently once more. I eased the door open, just wide enough to slip through sideways. A cold draft rolled out, carrying the distinct smell of wet stone, yeast, and old wine spills I didn't call out. Instead, I held my light low, pointed its beam at the floor, and took my first steps inside. The ramp quickly transitioned into a short flight of stairs after the threshold, perhaps 15 steps down into the earth. The walls were rough-hewn stone, with moisture having crept through in places, leaving dark, telltale stains. At the bottom of the steps, the space opened into a cavernous main room, barrel racks lining both sides. My light caught the gleaming rows of oak and revealed a center aisle just wide enough for a pallet jack. I listened longer than I moved. There was a faint, irregular drip from somewhere deeper in the complex, a soft, almost imperceptible hum from a small, distant fridge, and the soft crunch of my shoes on the dust-laden floor. No breathing. No hushed voices, no dragging footsteps. I began clearing the room row by row, no bodies, no fresh signs of disturbance or struggle, just layers of dust, clinging cobwebs, and a few broken bottles near the far wall. Someone had left in a hurry, but they hadn't died here. That, for reasons I couldn't quite articulate, mattered immensely. On the left side of the cellar, a heavy wooden door led to a smaller storage room. It stood ajar. I pushed it open with my boot, waited, then stepped inside. Shelves lined the walls, holding boxes of labels, corks, and various cleaning supplies. Sitting on the floor were 3 plastic crates of bottled water and a metal cabinet labeled Maintenance. The cabinet door was also ajar. I pulled it open with 2 cautious fingers and found a collection of hand tools, spare light bulbs, electrical tape, and a small box of fuses. No weapons, no cash. Nothing that looked like a panic stash. On the right side of the main room, a short corridor branched off, leading to a square space with large concrete tanks built directly into the walls. A sturdy metal ladder ascended to a hatch in the ceiling. I tested the rungs. They felt solid enough. I decided to leave it for later. Hatches, I knew, always worked both ways. Back at the bottom of the stair, I looked up. From this vantage point, I could see every step in most of the main room simultaneously. One door at the top, one narrow path down, and solid stone all around. No big windows to shatter, no wide hallways to patrol, no second staircase to hide surprises. Compared to the exposed confines of a truck cab or the vulnerability of a random house, this was a simpler space to secure. Right then, standing in that cool, dim cellar, I made my choice. If I kept drifting from place to place, sooner or later I was going to stumble into the wrong corner or fall asleep at the wrong hour. Out there, every direction presented a blind spot. Down here, most problems would have to funnel through one single door and one set of stairs. I walked the cellar again, this time assessing what elements I could adapt to my advantage. The wine barrels were heavy, already resting on their racks, and could provide significant ballast. The shelves in the side room could easily be repurposed as braces. The ladder and hatch, while a potential risk, also offered a crucial backup exit if the main stair ever became compromised. The place wasn't ready yet, but it clearly had the right bones for defense. I closed the main door, slid the lock back into place, and placed my palm flat against the cold metal. This was it. No more sleeping in the truck. From this point on, the plan was simple. Make this cellar my stronghold and hold it for as long as possible. My first step was to ensure the door wouldn't fly open if something heavy hit it. The lock alone wasn't enough. The frame was old, the hinges were rusty, and I couldn't trust anything that had sat neglected for so long. I checked the maintenance cabinet again. Inside, I found a short stack of 2x4s, a box of long screws, a few metal brackets, and an old cordless drill with one battery that still held a little charge. On the bottom shelf, I discovered duct tape and plastic ties. Far from perfect, but it was enough to get started. Before I even touched the door, I cleared a straight path from the stair to the main room. Broken glass went into a bucket. Corks and paper were piled neatly, loose tools and bottles were moved to the walls. If I ever had to move fast in the dark, I didn't want to trip over anything. When the floor was clear, I went back up the steps and opened the cellar door. From this vantage point, the weak spots were obvious. The latch area was chewed up. The outer edge showed a gap wide enough to fit a coin. If something repeatedly slammed into it, the screws would eventually tear out. I cut a board long enough to span the door at chest height. I fastened a bracket on each side, screwing them in until the drill began to whine. The board slid into the brackets, forming a makeshift bar. I could lift it out in a second if necessary, but it would absorb the initial heavy impact. A shorter board went lower, closer to my knees, secured by simple hooks. With the door braced, I looked at the stair. The steps were narrow and steep, and the sharp turn at the top forced anyone coming down to slow their pace. This was my choke point. I kept the modification simple. I marked the edge of the top step with a strip of bright tape, ensuring I could find it even in low light. Halfway down, I set a loose board on one tread. Beneath it, I scattered a few screws and chips of glass designed to crunch loudly under any weight. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone, but rather to serve as an audible alarm if someone was on the stairs. Back in the main room, I studied the barrels. Each one was incredibly heavy, but the racks they sat on could be slid with enough effort. I chose 3 racks near the center aisle and angled them so the gaps between rows didn't line up directly. That way, if anyone managed to force their way through the door and past the stair, they wouldn't have a clear, straight path into the deeper parts of the cellar. I chose a corner to make my own. It sat nestled between 2 support columns, with solid stone on one side and a clear, unobstructed view of the stairs on the other. A stack of crates served as a makeshift table. 2 pallets and a foam mat scavenged from an upstairs storage closet transformed into a bed, keeping me off the cold concrete floor. From that vantage point, I had a clear line of sight to anyone who might navigate through the angled racks. Before hauling anything else down, I ventured outside again. My truck sat exactly where I'd left it. Its nose pointed towards the service road. I began loading my remaining supplies into crates. Canned food, bottles of water, a box of candles, spare batteries, a small first aid kit, and the short crowbar I kept under the seat. With each trip down the ramp, I paused, listening intently. Back inside, I established a set of basic rules. No open flames near the barrels, no loud work after dark, no equipment left in the walkway. Every tool I used was to be returned to its designated hook or shelf immediately. I jotted these rules down on a piece of cardboard and taped it to a support post near the stairwell. I established and marked one safe path. Tape, set at knee height, ran from the bottom of the stair to my designated corner, and then onward to the side room where water and tools were stored. If the lights failed, I could extend a hand and follow the tape line, avoiding getting lost in the absolute darkness. On the floor, I laid a strip of old rug where footsteps would dampen the sound on the stone. By the time I finished, the daylight outside had begun to fade. I closed the cellar door, dropped the bar into place, leaned my weight against it once for reassurance, and then switched off the overhead fluorescent strip. The cellar went dim, then plunged into utter darkness, settling into an eerie stillness. That night, the plan remained starkly basic. Stay off the road, stay off the stairs, and listen. If anything so much as brushed the door, I'd feel it through the frame. If anyone made it down the steps, the telltale crunch under the loose board would instantly give them away. If silence held, I'd allow myself to sleep in short blocks, refining the plan further in the morning light. Morning arrived slowly underground. There was no sunrise, of course, just a subtle shift in the feel of the concrete beneath my hands and the way the air seemed to hang. I checked my watch, counting back the hours. I had managed to get some sleep in 3 short blocks with no disturbances at the door, water and food. That had to be my next priority. A strong door means nothing if you pass out from hunger. So I headed up to the surface. The air outside was cool and gray, a stark contrast to the cellar's perpetual twilight. No fresh tracks marred the gravel lot. Behind the main building, I found my first truly good sign. 2 large plastic tanks stood on a raised frame near the wall, each fitted with a pipe running down to a valve at the bottom. Dust coated their sides, but when I tapped them with my knuckles, one sounded reassuringly full, the other about half empty. I placed a jug under the valve and cautiously turned it open a little. Clear water began to flow. No strange smell, no discoloration. I filled the jug, then carefully closed the valve and carried it inside. Back in the cellar, I set the jug on a crate and began looking for anything I could use to make the water safer to drink. Rummaging through the maintenance cabinet, I found a small camping stove, a half-empty bottle of fuel, and a thermometer sealed in a plastic case. There was also a box of coffee filters and a roll of clean cloth. I established a simple purification process. Filter first, boil second, cool last. I poured the water through the cloth and paper filters into a pot, lit the stove, and watched the thermometer until it registered that the water had held a boiling temperature long enough to kill any contaminants. Then I let it cool in clean, sterilized bottles and marked them clearly with tape. Finding food proved to be more challenging. The cellar itself held little beyond wine. The tasting room and the small kitchen upstairs offered better prospects. I moved slowly, methodically, clearing one room at a time, always keeping my ears open. The bar area yielded a few jars of olives, some sealed nuts, and packets of crackers that had unfortunately gone soft. In a back cabinet, I hit the jackpot. A crate of canned tomatoes, beans, and a few tins of fish. Someone had clearly stocked up for events and never got to use them. I meticulously checked each can with my fingers and eyes. No bulges, no leaks, no heavily rusted seams. Anything that clicked, hissed, or simply looked suspicious went into a box marked trash. I carefully carried the good cans down to the cellar and sorted them neatly on a shelf near my corner. Labels facing forward, dates clearly visible. It felt meticulous, almost obsessive, but it would mean less guessing, less wasted effort later on. Once these basic necessities were secured, my focus shifted to sound. The cellar sounded subtly different in the middle of the day. Small pops and creaks from the wood, a slow drip near the tanks, and a persistent faint hum from something embedded in the wall. I methodically walked the entire space, listening from every vantage point. At the door, at the bottom of the stair, between the rows of barrels, and directly under the ceiling hatch with the ladder. Any noise I didn't immediately recognize or understand went onto a mental list. The persistent hum in the wall, it turned out, came from a small unplugged fridge in the side room. I pulled its plug and the sound ceased instantly. The drip near the tanks was traced to a valve that hadn't been closed all the way. I tightened it until the drip became a slow seep, then thoroughly wrapped the joint in tape. Down here, true silence wasn't the goal. Predictable sound was the objective. I needed to know which creaks belonged to the settling building and which did not. With that in mind, my rules shifted. No metal dropped carelessly on stone. No dragging barrels unless it was a deliberate action. No tapping without a clear reason. That first full day passed in a series of repetitive loops. Check the tanks, check the door, boil water, eat a small sparse meal, walk the perimeter of the lot. Reset the tape lines. Each loop solidified the feeling that this place was becoming less like a strange unknown territory and more like a finely tuned tool in my hands. That night I killed my light and sat in the profound darkness, not even attempting to sleep. The stair remained a darker, looming shape in front of me. The door remained a stark rectangle at the top of the stairwell. I lay down, my boots positioned near the edge of the mat, my hand resting close to the crowbar I kept by my corner. I told myself I would stay until the water ran dry, the food ran out completely, or the cellar proved it could no longer keep the outside world out. In the end, however, something else entirely decided that for me. The cellar didn't stay quiet for long. It waited until I was fully accustomed to the sound of my own breathing and the steady hum of the building before it decided to add anything new to the symphony of the underground. The new sound started small, a light tap on metal with a distinct pause between each hit. I lay still on the mat and counted the rhythm. 3 seconds, then 4, then 3 again. It wasn't pipes settling, and it certainly wasn't the fridge. I had unplugged that hours earlier. The tapping shifted. At first, it seemed to come from the wall near the tanks, then it gradually crept toward the stairwell. I sat up, letting my eyes adjust in the gloom, and instinctively followed the tape line at my knee to the post where I kept the flashlight. I flicked it on, sweeping the beam low, and checked the steps. The door at the top was shut. No shadow underneath it, no dust disturbed on the treads. The tapping resumed clearer now, and I knew exactly what it was. Fingers on metal, probing for purchase. They had found the ramp. Leaving the surface door closed but not chained had been a deliberate choice. If a person found it, they could come in quietly, offering a chance for negotiation. If the dead found it, they would simply batter it until it eventually yielded. Either way, this was the first true test of the cellar's defenses. I shoved my feet into my boots, buckled my belt, grabbed the crowbar, and walked with purpose to the bottom of the stair. The tapping had transformed into a dull, steady thud. Something was relentlessly battering its weight against the outer door, resting for a moment, then repeating the assault. 1 impact, then 2. A brief pause, then it started again. I cut the light and listened. After a few more sets of impacts, another weight joined the assault. The metal groaned once, a single drawn-out sound of protest. Drifting dust motes floated down from the frame and settled on the steps. If the door failed, whatever was outside would fall straight onto the top step. The bar I had added would help, but only if I was there to back it up with my own weight. I took 2 steps up and braced my shoulder against the inside surface of the door, my hand on the temporary board at chest height. Up close, the proximity clarified the sounds. There was the unmistakable scrape of shoe on concrete and the rhythm of a slow, shambling drag. No quick breathing, no curses, no short words exchanged between impacts. Just the sheer force of impact and that broken, raspy air. Dead then. That solidified what kind of visitor I had. There was no need to argue with anyone through the door. No need to choose who lived and who stayed outside. My job became simple. Keep the lock set and see if the frame could take it. With the next impact, I pushed back. I drove my legs into the step and leaned in hard. Whatever was on the other side bounced off and slid down the metal. A guttural, raspy noise came through the gap around the latch. Not actual speech, but a broken, corrupted sound. They kept at it for a while. Every blow tested the hinges, the screws, and the bracket I had driven in with a tired drill. Then the pattern shifted. One hit landed slightly off kilter. The next came late. The last one was distinctly weaker. After that, nothing at all. I remained pressed with my shoulder on the door, counting the seconds in my head. When I reached 60, there was only the ambient creaks and groans of the building. I wasn't about to open it. Curiosity, I knew, was how people ended up in situations they couldn't fight their way out of. Instead, I withdrew until I could see the whole stair and sat there, the crowbar resting across my knees. If they were still outside, they might still be scratching at the edges. If they had simply wandered away, the door had still proven its worth. It had bought me time. Sleep was out of the question for the rest of the night, but at least the battering had stopped. As my watch read morning, I retrieved the bar and opened the door a hand-width crack. No frantic rush, no grasping hands immediately shot through the gap. Cool air flowed in from the ramp. I stepped out cautiously and checked the paint. 2 long streaks of grime ran across the metal at shoulder height. Smaller, scuffed marks sat lower down where hands had slid. At the base, the dust on the ramp showed faint, shallow toe drags. I traced the tracks upward. 2 sets of unmistakable prints came from the road, slightly weaving, then converging on the shaded area above the door. No third set of footprints behind them. No fresh tire marks in the lot. No new trash on the ground. They had wandered in, aimless and alone. That meant no one was actively directing them here, but it also confirmed the cellar was a magnet for trouble. Back inside, I secured the door once more and dropped the bar into place. This encounter provided a mental checklist. The door could withstand 2 bodies the brackets held. The frame bent but didn't entirely crack. If another larger assault came, I'd need more than a single board in my own body, so I went about reinforcing what was accessible. The chest-high bar would remain, but it was clear more work was needed. 2 days passed before anything else changed. I settled into a simple loop. Mornings were dedicated to water, food, and small repairs. Afternoons were spent walking the lot, always keeping the cellar door in sight. Nights belonged to the stair, the door, and listening for any patterns that didn't quite fit. On the 3rd day, I heard an engine. It was faint at first, a low hum that rose and fell with the road. I went still between 2 racks, every muscle tensed. The sound grew, then faded, then started again. Whoever was driving was clearly keeping their speed down. I killed the cellar light, climbed to the top of the stair, and opened the door just enough to get a narrow view of the lot. A small car rolled past the main gate without slowing. It went up the road, paused at the next bend, then backed slowly into view. This time it stopped right by the old sign with the peeling tours daily. The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out and stood with her hand resting on the roof. Dark jacket, a pack slung over one shoulder. She scanned the road in both directions, then fixed her gaze on the winery. I watched from the deep shade of the doorway. If she was sick, it certainly didn't show in her walk. No stutter step, no dragging limb. She moved like someone who had been on the move for a long time and was now truly running out of options. She stayed at the fence line and raised both hands, a clear gesture of non-aggression. "If anyone is in there, I'm not here for trouble," she called out, her voice carrying clearly across the gravel lot. "I want water and a place to rest for one night." I didn't answer. People say whatever they think will open a door. She kept glancing at the main building, then the slope behind it, as if trying to discern if there was more than one way in or out. She waited a full, agonizing minute. When nothing happened, she set her pack down on the gravel and took a deliberate step back from it. "Name's Elena," she said. "I came from the town east of here. I lost the last group 2 days ago. I can work, and I can follow rules. If you're not taking anyone in, say nothing, and I'll move on." Moving on meant more empty road and nights just like the ones I had only recently escaped. Still, I stayed quiet, observing. The wind rustled, moving her hair across her face. She made no move toward the door, nor did she bolt back to her car. She simply stood there, watching the dark glass of the tasting room. After another long minute, she picked up her pack and turned as if genuinely ready to leave. That was when I spoke. "Stop there," I said, my voice low but firm, coming from the doorway. "Don't come closer to the ramp." She froze, then turned her head just a fraction toward the sound of my voice. "Copy that," she said. "I'll stay exactly where I am." "Hands up again," I instructed. "Turn around slowly." She complied without hesitation. Her jacket rode up slightly. I saw no fresh bandages, no suspicious dark stains. "Any bites?" I asked. "No," she replied. "Scratches from branches, that's all." "Lift the sleeves," I commanded. She rolled them to her elbows and held her arms out. Thin, healed lines crisscrossed the skin, evidence of past struggles but nothing recent. "Take off the pack and step away from it," I said. "Turn it so the pockets face me." She carefully set the pack down, spun it with her foot, and stepped back. "There's a knife in the side pocket," she offered. "No guns. I lost my last one yesterday." I believed the knife part. The gun I remained skeptical about. "Unzip the side pocket with 2 fingers," I said. "Put the knife on the ground, then move back again." She did. The knife clattered onto the gravel. She stepped away again and held her hands out, open and empty. "My name's still Elena," she reiterated. "Are you alone in there?" "Doesn't matter right now," I replied. "Face the road and stay there." She turned to the road and stared at the empty asphalt. No cars, no walkers. No one else emerged from the rows of vines. If she had friends waiting, they were either incredibly patient or exceptionally well hidden. Either way, the risk was already present. Sending her back wouldn't erase it. Letting her in, however, might just give me one more pair of hands and eyes. I made the call. "Walk to the gate," I said. "Stop at the first post you reach. Keep your hands where I can see them." She didn't argue. Gravel crunched under her boots as she walked to the gate and stopped by the first post. Her hands stayed up. Her shoulders were squared, but the weariness showed in the subtle way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "Turn toward me," I said. "Keep your hands where they are." She turned, squinting hard, trying to pinpoint my exact position in the heavy shadow cast by the ramp. "You said you could follow rules," I added, my voice flat. "Consider this one of them." "I get it," she answered, a flicker of something almost like relief in her eyes. "You're talking, so that's a good sign." I stepped out just far enough that she could discern a shape, but not yet a face. "Last check," I stated. "Any fever, blackouts, or periods of unexplained time in the last week?" "No," she replied firmly. "I'm a light sleeper, and I remember every bad minute. Lost 2 people at a gas station, 1 on the road. Nobody bit me. Nobody bled on me. I left before anyone could even ask the question. That matched what I'd observed." Her clothes were worn but not ripped. Skin bore marks but wasn't torn. "Pick up the pack," I instructed. "Slowly bring it to the gate and set it down again." She complied. When the pack was resting by the post, I told her to back away and kneel. Then I emerged from the ramp, crowbar held low at my side, and checked the pack myself. Clothes, a blanket, a small pot, an empty water bottle, a few cans, a folded map, and a radio with dead batteries. The side sheath where the knife had been was empty. "All right," I conceded. "Stand up. You can come in, but you follow my lead and you don't touch a single door unless I tell you to." Relief flickered across her face, but she didn't smile. "That works for me," she replied. "I've had enough of people who improvise." We moved together down the ramp. I watched her feet on the cracked concrete and listened for any subtle change in her breathing as we reached the cellar door. Inside, I shut the door, dropped the bar into place, and pointed towards the stairwell. "Careful on the steps," I warned. "They're narrow." She descended slowly, one hand trailing along the rough stone wall. At the bottom, her eyes swept over the racks, the crates, the tape line, and the makeshift bed in my corner. "You did all this alone?" she asked, a note of awe in her voice. "For now," I replied, my gaze meeting hers. "That changes if you stay." "I stay," she answered without a moment's hesitation. "At least until we see if this place can truly hold." I showed her the path marks and the list of rules I'd taped to the cardboard. She read each line, nodding slowly. "No open flames near the barrels, no loose tools in the walkway, no loud work after dark," she recited, a small, approving nod accompanying each point. "All this makes perfect sense." "You said you could work," I reminded her. "What did you do before all this?" "Restaurant," she replied. "Front of house first, then some stock work when they were short-staffed. I know how to carry things without dropping them and how to navigate a room without bumping into people." That was a good enough start. Extra hands meant we could do more than just patching the same 3 spots every single day. I offered her the side room as her designated corner plus half the available shelf space. In return, she helped me push 2 more racks into better defensive positions and taped a second parallel path line from the stair to the tanks. Having another person irrevocably changed the cellar. There was more sound, more movement, more potential for arguments, but critically, there was also someone else to watch the door while I slept. We quickly established a simple schedule. 1 person awake on the stair or near it, the other off the floor getting much-needed rest. Shifts ran 4 hours. If anything hit the door, the one on watch woke the other, no questions asked. For a few days, that was our entire world. We fixed small leaks, boiled water in significantly larger batches, and walked the property together. The cellar door always within sight. She had a keener eye for loose boards and weak railings than I did. I, in turn, had more practice saying no to bad ideas. Slowly but surely, the place tightened up. About 2 weeks after Elena's arrival, the road brought us one more problem and perhaps one more chance. This time, it didn't start with tapping or slow, shambling footsteps. It began with the low, impatient idle of a truck that was clearly running on fumes and a driver very low on patience. The truck engine idled just beyond the gate, its rumble rising and falling as if the driver were light-footing the pedal. Elena and I were in the main room when it started. She looked up from the water jugs. I had my hands on a crate of cans. We both froze. "Same drill," I said, my voice low. "Stay off the stair until I call for you." She nodded, her eyes wide, and stepped back to her corner. I went up, killed the cellar's overhead light, and cracked open the door at the top, just enough for a sliver of visibility. A flatbed truck was parked in the lot, angled unmistakably toward the main building. Only one headlight worked, casting a weak, jaundiced beam across the gravel, and the old sign that still, defiantly, promised tours daily. 2 plastic tanks were strapped to the bed. Whoever was behind the wheel had clearly come for water. The cab door groaned open. A man climbed out, mid-30s, cap pulled low, jacket hanging loose. He stood for a moment, stretched his back, then his eyes swept the yard, taking everything in. "Anyone home?" he called out, his voice echoing a little. "Or is it empty?" I didn't answer. He waited, then let out a slow breath and shook his head. "All right," he murmured, more to himself than anyone. "We do this careful." He checked the straps on his tanks, then walked straight for the side of the building, bypassing the obvious tasting room and the cellar ramp. I eased the cellar door shut, the creak barely audible, and dropped the bar into place. Elena watched my face intently as I descended the steps. "Human," I reported, keeping my voice low. "Just one I can see. He's got a truck and empty tanks, and he headed straight for the water wall." She wiped her palms nervously on her pants. "If he knows where the lines are, he's either worked here or somewhere damn similar," she said, her voice tight. "Either way, he's not just poking around." "We need to see more before we make a move," I said. The small room with the ladder finally proved its worth. I led her there, opened the hatch slowly, just a sliver, until a line of light appeared from above. I climbed into the storage closet above, leaving the hatch cracked, and shifted a box just enough to peek through the door gap. From there, I had a narrow, high-up angle on the yard. The man was now standing by the wall near the outside tanks. He ran his hand along the pipe, found the main valve I'd been using, and tried it. Nothing came out. I'd shut it tight days ago. He frowned, then looked up at the gutters and the slope that concealed the cellar. This wasn't his first winery, not by a long shot. He backed off a step, then raised his voice again. "If anyone's here, I'm not after your last drop," he called, his voice now carrying a tone of negotiation. "I've got my own tanks. I just want what you can't carry. We can trade, or I can walk away." "Stay right where you are," I said, my voice barely above a whisper through the crack. "Hands where I can see them." He stopped, then slowly lifted his arms. "Name's Jonas," he said, sounding almost relieved to state it. "I ran bulk loads before all this went to hell. Wine, water, juice, anything in tanks. I know how not to crack your lines." "So what do you want from here, Jonas?" I asked. "Water and a look at your setup," he replied. "If you've got a well or roof storage, I can help you pull from it without burning fuel. You already used one valve. I saw the wet patch under it." "And what's in it for us if we let you fill up?" I countered. "You keep your hands on every valve," he promised. "I'll move the extra into my tanks and show you what feeds what so you don't ruin a pump or choke a line. If you don't have a pump, I can still show you how to move more water with less effort. You get a system that lasts longer. I get to stay on the road with a full load." Elena whispered up through the hatch, her voice tight with urgency. "We could really use that," she said. "Right now, we're just guessing." She wasn't wrong. I knew how to boil water and close valves, sure, but I didn't know every path behind these walls. "Face the truck and stay put," I told him, my voice brooking no argument. "If you move toward any door without my say-so, you leave empty-handed." "Fair enough," he replied. He turned toward the flatbed, his arms falling loose at his sides. I let the closet door fall mostly shut and looked back down through the hatch. Elena met my eyes, giving one small, grave nod. We both understood the inherent risk bring him close, and we might gain a reliable system, turn him away, and we might well see him again later. Or worse, he might tell others. I went back down and closed the hatch. Elena waited by the stairwell, her gaze fixed on me. "So," she asked, her voice low, "is he trouble or is he help?" I set the crowbar back on its hook. "Could be both," I replied, the thought heavy on my mind. He knows this place too well for it to be random. We quickly agreed on one non-negotiable rule. He was not coming inside. If Jonas wanted water, he would stay in the yard and talk us through the lines while we worked the valves from down here. No tour of our setup, no casual stroll through our shelves, no chance to take stock of our food supplies. At the top of the stair, I opened the cellar door and stepped into the stark light of the ramp. Jonas was still by the flatbed, his hands deliberately kept away from his belt. "You're holding the cellar," he called out, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Smart. It's the part that doesn't blow over." "You said you know bulk systems," I answered, keeping my tone even. "Show me from there. You don't cross this crack." I tapped my boot pointedly on a faint line in the concrete, marking our boundary. He nodded, acknowledging the line. "Those tanks catch rain off the roof," he explained. "You close the bottom valve. There should be a joint behind that wall, sending overflow down. It likely ends at a tap near your floor drain. Open the joint, crack that tap, and gravity moves water for you." "And what do you want in return?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. "I want my tanks half full in 10 minutes by my truck to check my map," he said. "I leave before dark." Elena stood just inside the shadow of the doorway, out of his line of sight. If he was lying, he might be buying time for someone else to show up. If he was honest, turning him away would mean discarding the first valuable skill set we'd encountered since the world fell apart. "All right," I said, making the decision. "You stay by the tanks and tell me what to turn. I stay by the valves. If anything moves that isn't you or me, we shut it all down and you drive off empty." "Deal," he said, his voice firm. "Mark what you touch as you go." I went back down into the small utility room beside the tanks. Jonas called directions from outside, his instructions short and clear. "Left wall low behind the boxes." Behind a stack of cartons, I found a T-shaped joint with a stiff handle. When I opened the tap near the floor drain, clear, cold water started to run into a waiting bucket. Elena handled the jugs. She slid empties under the flow, watched the level intently, swapped them out efficiently, and then moved the full ones along the designated tape path. We counted as we went. 4, 7, 10. Every few minutes I checked the lot through the narrow gap at the top of the stair. The truck remained exactly where it was. Jonas occasionally climbed onto the flatbed, checked his own valves and tightened straps as his tank steadily filled. When he finally called, half on my side, I closed the tap, then the joint, then the outside valve. He watched each precise movement and gave a slow nod of approval. "Label those," he instructed. "Roof, lower, main." Later they all blur together. Elena already had tape in her hand, a roll she always kept ready. We quickly wrote clear marks and wrapped them securely around the handles. It took only a minute, transforming guesswork into a reliable system. With his tank successfully loaded, Jonas leaned against his truck door, his gaze sweeping across the hill. "You two are further ahead than most groups I've seen," he commented. "Most try to hold a house with 6 doors and no plan for water." "We didn't pick this place because it's pretty," Elena interjected, her voice sharp but steady. "We picked it because it's small." He nodded once, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Small is good," he agreed. "Small is quiet." I asked where he was heading next. "West," he answered. "There's a bottling plant past the next town. If the tanks are empty, I still get steel over my head. If they're not, I get options." He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I'm not the only one reading maps this way. If I found this winery, others can too. Some will want your water, some will want your walls, and some won't bother to talk first." "Anyone we should particularly watch for?" I asked, sensing the gravity in his tone. "A blue pickup with white doors and no plates," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "If you see it crawl up that road, keep your heads down and your lights off. Don't even breathe." He climbed into the cab and started the engine, the familiar rumble filling the quiet. "Keep your paths clear and your rules short," he called out over the engine noise. "If I pass this way again and I'm still breathing, I'll knock before I drink." Then with a final wave, he rolled away, his truck disappearing down the winding service road. We watched until the sound faded completely into the distance. Elena looked at the newly labeled valves and the growing line of full jugs. "We learned a lot fast today," she admitted, a touch of wonder in her voice. "And now, one more stranger knows we're here." "Could have been worse for sure," I said, trying to sound reassuring. He left with water. We kept the cellar. After that, every time an engine noise drifted off the road, we remembered Jonas's chilling warning and made sure to check the lot twice before even considering opening the door. The first proof that Jonas had been right came 4 nights later. The day had been calm. No engines on the road, no shouts from the distant town, just the rhythmic whisper of wind through the vines and the familiar steady drip at the tank. We boiled water, double-checked our labels, walked the perimeter of the lot, and went underground before the light vanished. That night, Elena took first watch. One lamp over the main aisle was dimmed to a bare glow. I lay down on the mat, my boots still on, my pack close, the crowbar within easy reach. I drifted off, lulled by the quiet that had settled over us for several days. Her hand on my shoulder, a sudden weight, jolted me awake. "Truck," she whispered, her voice tight with urgency. "Slow. Close." The cellar light was already off. I followed the tape path to the stair and climbed until I could just make out the dark outline of the door. The engine rumbled through the frame, low at first, then growing stronger as it climbed the hill, adding a harsh grind of gravel. I eased the door open just a crack. Headlights swept past the old sign, then arced back, their beams coming to rest directly on the main gate. The truck stopped. It was exactly the blue pickup Jonas had described. White doors, no plates. 3 distinct shapes sat in the cab. After a tense minute, 2 of them climbed out. They moved with an unnerving efficiency, like this wasn't their first rodeo. One checked the road with a focused beam of his flashlight. The other walked directly to the gate chain, glanced at the cut lock, and simply pushed the gate open, ignoring the screeching hinges. Somebody's been here. The taller one's voice cut through the night. Tracks at the tanks, fresh mud. This place is live. The shorter man let out a humorless laugh. Good, he said, the sound chilling. I'm tired of empty rooms. They drove the truck into the lot, killed the headlights, but crucially left the engine idling. That immediately bothered me. People who plan to stay and sleep shut things down. People who plan to leave fast keep the motor running. I eased the door closed again, the soft click almost imperceptible, and dropped the bar into place. Elena waited at the bottom of the stair, her gaze fixed on my face, a silent question in her eyes. How many? She asked. 3 that I can see, I confirmed. 2 walking, 1 driving. They went straight for the water tanks. We go dark and stay off the door, she said, her voice a low murmur. If they think it's empty, maybe they'll just strip the outside and move on. The distinct scrape of boots on concrete followed, then a single sharp clang of metal. One of them had walked the path Jonas had pointed out, heading directly for the tanks. Valves shut, he called out, his voice now closer. But the ground under it is wet. Someone's been drawing from here. They'll be in the hill, the other one answered, his voice confident. Nobody camps out in the open if they've got a cellar. Their footsteps changed as they crossed the lot, then took on a hollow, echoing quality when they stepped onto the concrete ramp leading to our door. We instinctively backed away from the stair, retreating until the stacked barrels offered us some cover. Elena placed a hand on a rack, poised to shove it sideways if we needed to choke the aisle. My eyes remained locked on the dark square at the top of the steps, waiting. The first knock was light, more a tentative test than a deliberate hit. The second came harder, a more insistent thud. If you're holding this place, we can deal, a voice called through the door, surprisingly calm. We want water, fuel, and whatever you can spare. You keep your rooms. We'll keep the road clear next time we pass. Elena shook her head grimly. They won't keep anything clear, she whispered. They'll just bring more of their own. We stay quiet, I stated, my resolve firm. No answer, no deal. For a few tense minutes, they moved away from the ramp, their voices drifting. We heard the sharp shatter of glass, followed by harsh laughter. The blue truck's engine continued idling impatiently. Then a second engine answered from down the hill. This one revved higher, cutting out, then roaring back to life. The first crew, it seemed, had drawn company, and with that increased noise came the dead. I heard them before I saw them. The vines began to shake in 2 or 3 rows at once, a dry, rustling sound that was unmistakably not the wind. I moved back up, opened the door a thumb's width, and peered past the edge. Figures began to shamble out from the vines at the far side of the lot. Their clothes hung wrong, their heads tilted at unnatural angles as they fixed on the chaotic symphony of the trucks. They started their slow, relentless march toward the gate, forming a ragged line. The men near the tanks surprisingly did not panic. "Stay by the truck!" one shouted, his voice strained. "We clear these 3, then we go below." Below. They were already talking about the cellar as if it were their undisputed property. They quickly pulled tools from the truck bed. One wielded a crowbar, the other a short, heavy piece of pipe. They met the first of the dead near the center of the lot, swinging with brutal efficiency. Knees buckled, skulls took the brunt of the force, bodies dropped and for the most part stayed down. But behind them, more shapes were already pushing out of the vines. The crucial detail was where the men's eyes kept darting between each frantic swing. Their gaze constantly shifted from the falling bodies to the ramp leading to our cellar, and back again. Our door had transformed from a vague possibility into a very definite target. When one of the dead stumbled too close to the blue truck, the driver instinctively hit the horn. The blaring sound reverberated violently through the vines and across the slope. Every single shape in the rows, every shambling figure turned abruptly towards it. "That did it," Elena whispered, her voice laced with grim resignation. "They just told everyone up there exactly where to walk." More shapes slid out from between the rows, drawn relentlessly by the noise and the incessant idling engines. What had been a manageable few quickly swelled into a threatening multitude within the space of a minute. The men in the lot continued to swing, but their movements had noticeably changed. Their initial confidence was gone, replaced by a desperate, hurried energy. They began to back towards the truck between hits, trying to buy themselves space. The horn, in a desperate attempt to save their immediate selves, had utterly shattered the fragile shield of silence we had meticulously maintained. Now it wasn't just about them. The cellar, our sanctuary, was about to be besieged by things that didn't care who owned the keys, didn't understand negotiation, and only registered noise and living flesh. The lot had devolved into a chaotic deadlock. Two distinct groups, both loud and dangerous. One wanted our water and our walls. The other simply wanted anything that moved. We stayed rooted at the bottom of the stair, letting them tear into each other. Going up there would only have made us two more targets. Elena watched the dark square of the doorway, her knuckles white. "If they push through and make a run for the ramp, what then?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We hold the cellar," I said, my voice firm. "We aren't going out there for strangers who hit horns at night." Up top, someone finally seemed to grasp the grim mathematics. The taller man yelled at the driver to move. The truck lurched backward, then executed a tight, desperate arc toward the gate. Bodies slammed against its sides. Grasping hands slapped at the doors. The second engine sputtered and roared, cutting in and out as the new arrivals tried frantically to pull away from the swelling crowd. "They might lead them right to us," Elena muttered, her eyes wide. "Maybe," I answered, a hollow hope. "Or maybe the trucks will drag most of them down the road." The taller man scrambled into the truck bed, wildly swinging at the arms that reached for the tanks. The driver floored it. The blue pickup smashed through the gate, dragging a few bodies with it, and then vanished with a roar down the hill. The second vehicle attempted to follow, but its tires fishtailed wildly in the loose gravel. More of the dead swarmed it before it could even clear the lot. We heard metal rending flesh, followed by a choked scream that ended abruptly. The engine raced for a moment, then coughed, sputtered, and finally stalled. After that, only the dead remained. With the moving trucks gone, the lot began to fill, figures pouring in from the vine rows and down the hill. Impacts began to hit the outer door. Slow, deliberate waves at first, then faster and harder as more weight found the metal. Each impact sent a dull, resonant thud down the stairs. Vibrating through the thick stone dust shook loose from the frame and danced in the beam of my light. Elena tightened her grip on a barrel rack, her knuckles bone white. "If the frame gives," she said, her voice strained, "we fall back to the barrels, we choke the aisle and use the ladder if we have no other choice." "Right," I affirmed. "We move only if those boards crack or the frame starts to splinter." For a long, agonizing time, the door held. The added bar flexed under the relentless assault but didn't jump from its brackets. The dead, bless their mindless hearts, didn't understand hinges or leverage. They kept hitting the same solid spots, merely sliding off again and again. After what felt like an eternity, the rhythm of the impacts changed. The sound thinned. Some hits came light, some heavy. The pressure was noticeably dropping. By the time the watch on my wrist indicated that dawn was drawing near, the blows came only every few minutes. A single body at a time would test a door that no longer offered any response. Then even that sporadic assault finally stopped. We stayed exactly where we were. Moving too early, too eagerly was how people got hurt, how they made fatal mistakes. We waited pressed against the cold barrels until the dial on my watch finally declared the long, harrowing night done. "First look is mine," I said, breaking the heavy silence. "You stay here and listen. If you hear me fall, you do not come up, you take the ladder and you go. No hesitation." She nodded once, a single grim gesture. "Same rule if I ever take first look," she countered, her voice steady. "We don't both get stuck at the same door." I climbed to the top of the stair and laid my hand on the bar. The wood was warm from the relentless impacts. I slowly lifted it and, bracing my shoulder, eased the door open. Early, anemic light filtered onto the ramp. 3 bodies lay sprawled on the concrete, broken and still. More slumped in the gravel beyond, tangled around the stalled car. A few of the dead still wandered aimlessly near the fence line, turning now and then as if they'd completely forgotten their purpose. The gate hung at a precarious angle. One hinge had completely torn loose. The chain lay discarded in the dirt. I stepped out just far enough to thoroughly check the frame of the main door. It had shifted, yes, but the hinges were still surprisingly intact. The internal brackets hadn't torn free. The worst damage was a noticeable bend in the metal skin and a fresh set of dark streaks across the paint. We still had a door. I closed it again, dropped the bar securely into place, and went back down the stairs. Elena watched my face intently, then let out a long, shuddering breath she'd clearly been holding. "We kept the cellar," she said, a fragile relief in her voice. "For now," I answered, the caveat heavy in the air. "But this hill is on more than one map. Jonas was a warning, and these men were the undeniable proof someone with more people or more sense will find it eventually." "So what do we do?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. "We stay ready," I said, my words deliberate. "We use the quiet days to fix every weak point we saw tonight. We test the ladder exit thoroughly, we pack what we cannot replace, and we watch the road like hawks. If the wrong cars come up that hill, we don't argue at the gate. We go under the hill and leave." She nodded, a resolute acceptance. "And until then?" she asked. "Same rules." "Same rules," I affirmed. "Short paths, low noise, one door at a time." The barrel racks stood precisely where we had angled them. The tape lines still reliably led from the stair to the water and back. The labels on the valves clearly told us what to turn. We hadn't chosen a safe world. We had merely chosen one room within it that we could understand, that we could defend, that for now was enough to carry us from one sunrise to the next. The hill wasn't kind, but it was clear enough most days, and the only thing standing between us and the rest of it was what we built, one board and one rule at a time. In the days following the trucks and the crowd, the vineyard once again appeared empty. Wind rustled through the vines and birds flitted between the rows. From the road, it could have looked like any small winery that had closed in a hurry. The true difference lay hidden beneath the hill, behind a single battered door, with two people who had irrevocably lost their easy trust in quiet. We spent the next week on repairs. The gate was reinforced with a hinge salvaged from an upstairs office door. The chain was threaded back through the posts, cinched tight, creating the illusion that it hadn't been breached in months. Inside, the cellar door was meticulously disassembled and reassembled with renewed diligence. We added a second bar, repositioned the brackets, drilled new screws deep into solid wood, and affixed a strip of rubber along the bent edge for a tighter seal. Water remained our paramount concern. Jonas had detailed how the roof tanks supplied the lower tap, and his chilling warning about other people reading the same maps loomed large in our minds. Twice a week, we checked that the drains on the roof were clear. Each time we drew water, we counted the jugs and etched a mark on the wall near the utility room. If the count was off, we meticulously searched until we pinpointed the drip, the loose cap, or our own miscalculation. Food remained utilitarian, with flour, rice, beans, pasta, and cans transferred from the kitchen into sealed tubs in the cellar, while the finer bottles of wine were deliberately left on the racks reserved for potential trade. Nights underwent the most profound transformation. Following the blare of the horn in the lot, any engine noise became an instant alert. When we detected one, we extinguished the lights and retreated deeper between the barrels. If walkers shambled up the hill, they could grind around the gate and claw at the outer doors. As long as they didn't converge on the ramp, the cellar remained a crucial step removed from the chaos outside. Most nights brought nothing, yet once a single dead shape found the ramp and relentlessly scraped the door for nearly an hour before the sound finally faded. On another occasion, two figures on foot paused by the sign, quietly debating whether to risk the winery before ultimately choosing the town instead. Jonas never came back. Either he found his bottling plant or the unforgiving road had claimed him, taking him somewhere we would never know. We still invoked his name during our tasks, Elena often reminding me to perform specific steps, the Jonas way, when checking the valves. His chilling warning about the blue truck remained etched in our minds, and though we never saw that exact vehicle again, others came and went. Some slowed cautiously near the sign before rolling on, others passed without even brushing their brakes. On a particularly clear afternoon, we conducted a full-scale test of what leaving would truly entail. Packs were loaded in earnest, not as a mere drill. Irreplaceable tools were consolidated into a single crate by the stair. Tape, cord, knives, the small stove, spare batteries, a wrench, and one crucial spare valve. 3 days' worth of food sat prepared in 2 separate bags. Everything else in the cellar faded into the background, secondary to that critical test. We ascended the ladder, opened the hatch, moved cautiously through the upstairs rooms, and stepped outside, each of us grappling with the stark realization that we might not return. The chosen route began at the ramp, hugged the main building's rear wall, cut a winding path through the lower vines, and terminated at the far fence beyond. Lay a shallow creek bed running west, rough walking but perfectly concealed from the road. Days slid into weeks. We marked their passage in rows of 5 on the same wall, every 5th tally signifying another week the cellar had held, and another week the choice to leave remained ours. Over time, calendar dates lost their significance, replaced by the rhythm of our routines. We measured time by how often we filled the same jugs, retaped the same handle, or stood listening at the door for engines that perpetually failed to appear. Fear evolved but never truly dissipated. It shifted from a sharp, instinctive jump at every unfamiliar creak to a pervasive, steady pressure that drove us to double-check doors and meticulously count every step on the stair. One rule stood paramount: the cellar was a hold, not a home. Supplies would inevitably dwindle, and outdated maps would continue to funnel people towards this hill until the risk of remaining here unequivocally outweighed the risk of leaving. We established a clear threshold. When the roof tanks fell below half capacity and the canned food supplies dwindled to their final row on the shelf, we would depart without hesitation. For now, we haven't crossed that line. Water still flows when we open the correct taps. Our shelves, though thinner, are not yet bare. The door, scarred but solid, holds firm. Our escape packs sit poised by the ladder, and the cellar still grants us nights of comparative safety we could never have found out on the road. We maintained the rule board by the stair, adding to it sparingly. Elena, wise to her own limitations, stipulated no new plans be written when angry or exhausted. A rule forged after we nearly dropped a heavy rack during a heated argument. I similarly added, walk the full tape path daily. On the day I almost tripped over a crate someone had left out of place. Reading those terse lines aloud occasionally felt absurd, almost ritualistic, but it kept them from fading into the background of our new normal. For now, that was enough to keep us moving forward. For now, this is where the story ends. The hill above us isn't safe, the road isn't safe, and the town below isn't safe, but the cellar holds for another night, and that matters more than anything else right now. The door is scarred but solid. The bars sit straight in their brackets. The tape lines are up, the valves turn when we need them, and the packs by the ladder stay ready in case the next knock on the door is one we simply can't afford to answer. Nothing here is guaranteed. Water runs until it doesn't. Food lasts until it is gone. Engines fail, maps lie, people change. The only part we control is how we use the days when things still work. For us, that means one more walk around the lot before dark, one more check of the fence and the gate, one more listen at the cellar door before we kill the light and trust our rules. If you are listening to this from a place you are trying to hold, I hope some part of our routine helps you think through your own. Pick a room you can defend instead of a whole house you cannot watch. Keep one clear path you can follow in the dark. Treat water like it is already low, even if the tap still runs. Write your rules down somewhere you can see them, and do not ignore them just because a day goes by without trouble. If you made it this far into the story, thank you for listening. If you want more stories like this, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Stay safe, stay sharp, and do what you have to do to see another morning.